Today we have pick of the week. I have my good and divine this with us. So happy Friday, everyone. You guys, I apologize. You guys hear feedback on my end. I'm not sure why. Different devices, and it's giving me the same feedback. As long as you guys can hear me, let me know the quality or the sound is unbearable. See what we can do. But I appreciate everyone joining live. You guys have fun when you watch the replay. If you guys can show us some love, like the video, comment, I would appreciate that. And any feedback, because this conversation tonight, we're gonna we're gonna dive deep, multifaceted of spirituality, exemplary. So, without further ado, and if you want to introduce yourself to the audience.
Well, yeah. First of all, thank you so much for having me on your channel. I really love the aesthetics of your channel, and you are such a gorgeous being to me. I love your feminine energy and everything that you bring. And so, as I said, I'm Ann Divine Priestess. So, and just happy to be here.
I'm happy to have you. So in between, I'll be muting on my side. You guys will hear some moving around because I want to make sure you guys hear Ann. If anything, I want y'all to hear from her. This is, I see everyone. Greetings, greetings, greetings. So, Ann, please introduce yourself. Like, tell us a little bit about you as an introduction into who you are.
Anything Pacific, basically. I mean, because it's so much about me. I'm just a full, whole being that accepts everything that I am. So I wouldn't even know where to begin. I'll tell you this: I'm 45 years old. I have two grown kids and a grandchild. I do readings. I'm also a prophetess, and I have YouTube channel where I love to talk about my experiences with the divine, the experience I've been through in my childhood, also helping people to understand more about how to heal and work through their traumas, and how I took hold of God in my life and how I have that personal relationship with God.
Definitely, I feel like that's one of the main reasons why I love Anne. Her story is multifaceted. Her love of God, and then of the Bible. That's something that I can resonate with, and I feel like there's a way to connect with God and so forth. I feel like your story
Mm-hmm.
is one of those stories, even if it's one or you feel like it's a lot to so your usage of the Bible,
Mm-hmm.
you embracing like astrology, tarot, like that.
Mm-hmm.
How do you reconcile those different sides of spirituality together, where many people might see it as, I guess,
Um,
say an opposing energy?
I don't know. It was kind of choppy a little bit, like they said, laggy. So I don't know if I heard your question fully.
Okay,
I know that I think you're asking about how do I use the Bible,
so
or
you're with the Bible, you using the Bible, you tapping into astrology and readings and things like that. Usually, those are opposing forces for other. Like some
Mhm.
people look at that as like that's.
Right.
How do you
Yeah,
reconcile
exactly.
all of those?
That's a loaded question. Okay, I can go through so many layers when it comes to that. When I first, how do I even begin with that? Because in 2012, let's start with that. In 2012, I decided that I wanted to just wipe my whole slate clean with my understanding of God and spirituality and the church and the Bible. Because I kind of just grew up doing whatever was around me. I wasn't really thinking, like, I didn't really take enough time to really delve into what it is that I was believing in. And I was going to church around that time or just before I decided to make that change. And I found that just by going to church, and I was in the church for like, I was in the church like 5, 6, 7 days a week. I was in the choir, I was on the prayer team, I was in the young adult ministry, and yet I still felt like I was suffering on the inside. And I was like, I thought that this is supposed to be the only way. This is the truth. This is the light. This is supposed to help me heal. And it wasn't. It wasn't helping me heal. I was still very depressed. I was crying a lot. Um, I was just in a lot of emotional and mental pain, but I was in the church, and I was in the word, but I didn't even really know the word, to be honest. I don't think I really started to really understand the Bible and its deeper spiritual meanings until later on in life. And when around 2012, I said, you know what? I need to figure out who this God is for myself. I need to understand the divine for myself. And so I said, I'm going to stop going to church and I'm just going to study everything that I, want to study. So I was studying African spirituality, Native American spirituality. I was studying the origins of the Bible. I started studying Buddhism and all of those things and how to connect with nature. These things I had never done before. I remember hearing like yoga and connecting with nature is like evil and all of that. And I said, well, I'm gonna do and research everything they said is wrong. So I started getting into tarot. I started studying astrology. I started connecting more with nature. And I realized as I was meditating and doing yoga and connecting with tarot and studying all the different facets of spirituality that I was beginning to heal. Now, I was beginning to feel better about myself. Now, understanding I come from a long line of generational issues. So there's a lot there. Okay. There's a lot attached within me, around me, that I was having to break through. And so it's been this long journey, this long process of relieving myself of those issues. Okay. And so I will say, and I am going to talk more about this. This is something that I'm actually going to get deeper into as I'm revamping my Patreon. Is one of the things that I'm going to be discussing is how to understand the Bible properly and how I got to that place. And it's a lot though. Um, at one point, I started, okay, let me just say the divine God has took me through several different layers of understanding when it comes to my spirituality. I went from being an atheist to being someone who was a diehard Christian to someone who was only focused on spirituality to someone who then began to think that everything is me. From there, I started to dive into the whole, at that time, that paradigm was very deep, where everyone was thinking that everything is them. Like nothing, like we are in control of all of this. Like you know what I'm saying? Like it was like this energy of I can do it all. I'm the one that's in control of this. I'm the magical one who's making it happen. And there is a truth to that, but also there is also a falsehood to that as well. If you would notice that a lot of the um, popular spiritual people who began to teach that they are God and there is no other God outside of that, they usually end up falling. They usually end up imprisoned, something happening to them. They can't further their mission because the truth is that this is my truth, and this is because I've experienced this and I understand it on that type of level. Yes, we are aspects of God. However, we are not God itself, himself, herself. There is a force outside of us that assists us. And the thing that really brought me even more into that understanding was when I was around the age of 42, what was that, 2022? My ex-husband, he was my then husband, abandoned us, completely abandoned us. I mean, left me with nothing, stole my money, stole my son's money. He had a secret life behind my back. He had a whole fiance. He had a woman he was calling a fiance. I was married to this man for 17 years. That was some of the deepest pain I had probably ever been in, because I invested so much of my time and my energy into that relationship. 17 years. And I was hurt, like, I'm supposed to be God here. This is not supposed to happen to me. You know what I mean? Like, I was supposed to see this. I was supposed to know this. Ain't I God? Ain't I the all knowing? You know, that situation made me realize there's an outside force. Because there were times I couldn't get out of my bed. There were times where I didn't even want to live, to be honest. You know, it was a very painful situation, and I'm not going to go all into details with how further the demonic energy of that was, but something inside of me was like, you've got to do something different to get out of this, to heal from this. So I started reading my Bible every day. I was reading my Bible every day. I was praying 2 to 3 times a day. I was using my prayer mat. I had my prayer beads. It was during that time where I realized there's something outside of myself, because there's no way I can get through this without there being this huge force outside of me. Because me, I was weak. I was weak. I was crying all the time. It was, I didn't, he left me with no money. It was a real, he stole from me. It was like, I didn't know. I gave him money to pay our rent for that month when he left, and he took that money and additional money, did not pay the rent. Okay. So I had the rent man at my door, like, where's the rent? And I'm like, oh my God, he didn't even pay the rent. So I was stressed to the max. And I really did not know how I was going to get out of that situation. I had no idea it was so unexpected. It was so unexpected. And so in that weakness, all I had to rely on was God and his word. That Bible was getting me through. I'm going to tell you, because I would open that Bible up and there would be certain scriptures that would say, you would get through this, afflictions happen to us all. It was just certain scriptures that was pulling at me and was giving me the strength to get up every day and keep pushing. All my bills got paid. I don't even know how this was happening. It basically, it was the Bible and God that did it. Okay. It was not me. And so I know that there are certain scriptures in the Bible that say this and that. For example, about divination. But I will say I struggle a bit with that as well. However, God kept showing up every time I would be like, God, if you don't want me to do readings and all these other things anymore, because I already knew how powerful he was in my life already for what he had been taking me through. Every time I needed money, boom, boom, it was just appearing, boom, boom. Anytime we didn't fall off at all, but that was because I started devoting my life to God in a different way. I let go of the first perceived notion that I am God and I am doing all of this. I was humbled by that situation in 2022. Baby, you are not God. Okay. You are an aspect of God. You work with the divine. You work with God. God is within you. God is in everything. God is in it all. He allows those situations because, to be honest and to be truthful, I was kind of miserable in that marriage anyway. I really was. So God already knew, though, with my loyalty, the way that I am. I hope I'm not talking too long, but God already knows. Just interrupt, girl, if you want to interrupt me. But God already knows how I am. I'm a very loyal individual, and especially when it comes to when I'm in a committed relationship. So I'll never just give up on my partner, no matter what's going on. But that was also something I had to work through, because in my childhood, I saw my mother stay in a violent, very unloving relationship for years. And so I had already had it ingrained in me, like, no matter what goes on in your relationship, no matter what happens, you stay in it, you stick it out. And that was my mindset. So God already knew it would have to take something drastic like that for me to separate myself from that energy, from his energy. Because the fact that he was able to do what he did tells me a lot about who he really was on the inside. But when I met him, I was a totally different person from where I am now. And sometimes I ask myself, well, if I could change that situation, if I could choose differently, if I could go back. But the problem with that is I was in a different mindset. So I would have just chose someone else with that same type of energy because I was not healed, because I had not gone through the things that I needed to go through within myself to be able to choose better. So I had to process a lot of things during that time. And as far as getting into the Bible, I have this understanding from studying where the origins of the Bible, from studying Egyptian spirituality. I have this understanding that there are aspects in the Bible that come from ancient Egypt. So that is one reason why the Bible is so powerful, is because there are certain things inside of it that come from ancient Egyptian understanding. Now, mind you, the Bible has been rewritten and rewrote and, edited and all that. However, it says in the Bible several times that something that is important is common sense. It's in the word. Common sense. It also says in the Bible that God will show you secret and hidden things, which means there are things that God will show you that are not in the word, that are not in the word. And it's very important to have a actual relationship with God, not just, going with the motions, doing what everybody else is doing. It's important because one thing about it, when I wanted to give up on doing tarot because I was facing that energy like, well, it says, divination is evil and wrong in the Bible. But what God showed me was that you have to understand that that aspect was written for that particular group of people and time. I am a part of the Egyptian lineage of the ones who, Akhenaten. Akhenaten. He was one of the only ones who recognized and realized that ancient Egyptians were going too far with all their gods, where they were worshiping too many gods and they were giving all of these gods these powers. And he was the main one who said, well, there's only one God, Ra, the sun. He was trying to help them to change the dynamic of where they were going with their ancient, realizations and how they were believing in God. And if you research it, right around that time when he was trying to, Akhenaten was trying to implement the fact that we only need to be worshiping one God, Ra, the sun. Right after that, that's when ancient civilization began to go downhill, because right after his reign was over, they went right back to trying to worship all the different gods. It was then that ancient Egyptian civilization began to decline. Okay, so during that time, that aspect in the Bible that's talking about you shouldn't have all these gods before me and you should not be doing all these things and whatnot, it's because God was trying to save them from the destruction. Okay, that particular understanding that was given to those particular people in order to help to reverse where they were going, kind of like what happened with me, where all I was doing was believing that I was in control of this. I was believing in all these ancient Egyptian gods and stuff, like they were the ones. Not we love to say, oh, our ancestors got, I get that they do, but baby, we got some white in us too. Like there's all kind of ancestors in there, just to let you know. You're like, well, my ancestors, my black African. Baby, you got a lot of stuff in there. There's Chinese ancestor in there, Indian, there's all kind of stuff in there. So it's not just the ancestors, okay? But so that's where I am with the word. I love the word. I use that word, baby, full on, because I seen how it worked in my life. Have common sense to know what to implement and take from the word and use for myself. And I don't focus on the things that people say, oh, the divination, because I understand it fully. Actually understand why that was there, why that was placed, and where that was coming from. So when I was trying to ask God, should I continue with doing these cards and stuff, I actually took a break. I've done this at least 3 times, and every time God would be like, No, I want you to do this because I would say I'm taking a break with these readings and stuff. I'm not doing that. Next thing I know, I'm getting a plethora of people ordering readings, and I'm like, okay, okay, God, you really want me to do this. This is what God wants me to do. And that's why it's important to have a personal relationship with God. Because this ain't everybody path. It's your path is personal to you and your understanding and what God wants you to do. So, girl, I done sat up there and talked for 20 minutes. Yeah.
Okay, I had to mute myself. It's still echoing.
Thank
Um,
you.
that all in perspective, I feel that's a good conversation to have. Elaborate and go deeper. Maybe like come on here and do this another time too. But I wanted to ask, how did you get into tarot? Like, what called you?
To tarot? What called me? Okay. Yeah, that was it. That was it. In 2012, when I said I was gonna wipe my whole slate clean. And I said I'm going to research everything that the church says is bad, and I'm going to study it. Okay, so tarot was one of those things, and actually I got into cartomancy first. It was cartomancy, then it was tarot, and I was like, I'm really feeling this, I'm really liking this. How can they say that this is wrong or evil when this is helping me? It's fun, I like it, it's great. Like, how is this evil? Now let me just say, one thing I did learn is that there is good and bad in everything. So even in tarot, yes, there are some things that are not right. Even in the Bible, even by the Bible, there are things that aren't right. With the church, there are things that are good. There are things that are bad. Just because somebody go to church don't mean they're a good person. Just because somebody is a preacher or a pastor doesn't mean that they don't sin, doesn't mean that they don't have hidden demons that they're dealing with. We've seen it so much, these pastors and preachers and Catholic people who are out here molesting and raping children and different things like that. So this, in the same sense that the Bible can be used against people, that the church can be used against people, so can tarot. So that's why it's important to have your heart in the right space when you're dealing with tarot and different things like that. And that is why the path is not for everyone. The path is for those who are called to it. Now, we are needed. Tarot readers, spiritual guides, spiritual advisors, we are needed because it's in the word. It's in the word. The amount of people in the word that use dream seers and psychics, and they may not have called it psychics then, but that's what they were doing when they were doing let me tell you, divination is in the Bible. People don't understand that. Casting lots. They casted lots. They would cast lots. They didn't have cars, but they would use rocks, and they would use sticks, and they would even use sheep wool. There's a verse, or I think it was Samuel, or I can't remember exactly which one, who it was, but there is a small chapter in the Bible which talks about how there was a particular individual who needed a word from God, and he used sheep wool to get the answer. It literally says in the Bible, he asked God, if this sheep wool lands like this, I know you want me to do such and such and such. So he did whatever he did, tossed the sheep wool and landed where he landed. He said, okay, God, I got the answer. He asked him a second time. This is literally in the word. I'm going to do it again, God. And if it landed where it landed before, I know you want me to do such and such and such. He did it again, and it landed where he landed. What is that? What is that? That's just like doing some tarot cards. Hey, God, should I go over here to the what you call it? Do I need to go to that? Oh, okay, yes. Yeah, it's the same thing. And God allowed it. He spoke to God and asked him. So this is what people don't understand. Like, they don't actually read the Bible for themselves. And if they do, they don't have enough understanding. That's why it says in the word, ask God to give you understanding when you're reading the word, because he already knew that man would infiltrate the word and put certain things in there and change some word. You know how many books have been took out that word, out that Bible? Several books have been removed from the Bible itself, and there's no telling what was in those books. I know a lot of people say you can actually find some of the books. I haven't went that deep with it yet, But some people say you can actually find the missing books. But there are certain things in those missing books that they don't want you to know and see. And these things are talking about the deepness of the fact that this earth realm is highly spiritual, a highly spiritual place. But you have to be ready to understand that kind of understanding. And God only gives that understanding to those who are ready to receive it. Um, so that's how I got into tarot. I went all around there to say that, but that's how I got into tarot. I started studying it. And when I started studying it and doing the cards, I realized that it was resonating with me. And I was like this, and then as time will go on, I'm like, I'm helping people with these cards. I'm helping them gain clarity. How can helping someone gain understanding and clarity be wrong? See, that's common sense. That's common sense right there. But anyway, that's how I got in it. Mhm.
All right. So I'm sorry for the echo, y'all. But lastly, I want to ask. This is a question I ask all my mystics. What makes you mystical, and or how do you associate? What do you associate mysticism to be, or define?
How do I define mysticism?
And you, how do you mystic? What makes you mystical?
Um, that's interesting. You would ask that because the other day I said, I was, I like to talk to myself sometimes, and I sit at my altar and I talk to God and different things like that. And when I was talking to God at my altar, I said, Lord, I said, I'm very eclectic. It's like, how would I define it? I was just kind of curious, how would I truly define what I am? Because I'm into the Bible. I don't have nothing against the church. I actually think the church can be helpful in a lot of ways. I do tarot. I believe in crystals. Okay. I believe in prophecy. What else? I believe in saging. I do energy healing. I'm like a shaman. I've actually helped assist so many people through energy healing. I believe in all of those things. And I said, well, God, what would you call that? And I decided to kind of research that. I think I put it in Chat GPT or something like that. I said, what would you call a person like this? And I had put all the things there, that I do and stuff. And it said, well, you would be like the ancient mystics. That's what it said. It didn't name some of the, and I said, well, back then, were mystics known as something positive or negative? Because, nowadays they try to turn it into something negative. And it actually said back then they were revered, and they were known, it was positive, highly positive to be known as a mystic back then. And they also, because I practice celibacy as well, so they also said I had some associated with being a nun. Okay, yeah, I get it. All right, yeah, okay, I got that part. But yeah, um, so that's what it is. That's why I call myself the divine priestess, because I don't want to put myself too far in a box. And I feel like as being a divine priestess, someone who is of God, someone who hears from God, and a priestess is can be a lot of things, the mystic, the prophetess, the spiritualist, the shaman, the healer, the energy healer. And so that's kind of how I see myself, as the mystic.
I appreciate you coming on, and I'm sorry for y'all because I might have echoing, so it's been an issue the whole time. But I appreciate everybody that joined the live with us tonight and sharing her story. There's a lot that I feel like we can even have another live. Like,
We can.
we're live. You can come on my channel. Doesn't matter. I'm dead
We
ass.
definitely can, because I brought you on my channel twice, girl, because you were so amazing. But
Yeah.
yes, we can definitely do another live if you like. Y'all, I don't know. Are you gonna put my link for the book down there? Y'all check my book
It's
out.
linked. Yeah, everything's
Okay.
linked.
Okay, great. Y'all go check my book out, Memories of a Girl Once Was. You know what I'm saying? It's an easy read. I've heard it reads like a movie. I got a couple of great reviews on Amazon from this book. You can find it on Amazon. Y'all can see a little bit more I put a little bit about what I went through as far as, being raped and going through what I went through with my first ex and how I experienced life in a violent home, And all of that stuff is in this book, and how I finally came to the understanding of who God was to me. I might do a part two starting from where I experienced that trauma at in 2022, but that's what this book is on right here. So I really appreciate you for bringing me on the channel. This has been just elevating, beautiful, beautiful conversation.
I have to keep muting, but yes, I appreciate you for coming on. I'm blessed and grateful to have you grace the channel because a lot of what you're talking about, I feel like people need to hear that contrast, especially with spirituality and in the Bible and things. You know, there's
Yes,
many different
ma'am.
on the Bible.
Yep.
I would appreciate your perspective sharing interview with us,
Okay.
and I'm live. But
Okay.
yeah, make sure y'all show and some love. All of her information, stay in contact with her in the description. And I appreciate so much love to the like. So much love, you guys.